Hi, my name is Deepak Malhotra, and I'm a professor of negotiations at Harvard Business School. I'm also co-author of the book Negotiation Genius and author of the book Negotiating the Impossible. In this series of videos, I'm talking about the topic of negotiation, and in each clip I talk about one key idea, an insight, an approach, a tactic, or a principle that hopefully will help you as you navigate your own deals and disputes. In this video, I want to talk about something that I've observed in meetings that I think is actually quite pernicious. Think about a strategy meeting, thinking about a board meeting, think about any situation where a group of people have been brought together to solve some problem. And in the room, there's a number of people sitting around the table, and one of those people is the boss, or the leader, or the person with the highest status. And here's what I often observe. When the leader speaks, when the person with highest status speaks, when the boss speaks, they usually look around the whole table as they share their ideas. As they're talking, they make eye contact with a lot of different people. But that's not what anybody else in the room does when they speak. When somebody else in the room speaks, they're spending most of their time looking at the boss. They're trying to make sure that what they're saying is going over well with the boss, that the boss is nodding along, that they're coming across as competent, that if the boss wants to move in a certain direction, they're on the right side of it. And that is a particularly dangerous thing to do in organizations where you're interested in solving real problems. The advice I always give to leaders is make sure you don't create a culture, make sure you don't create an environment in your meetings and in your organization where you are seen as someone who rewards people for coming up with the right solution. You don't want to reward people for coming up with the right solution or the right answer. Rather, what you want to do is reward people for coming up with good arguments. Because if the meeting that you've called is at all important, it's probably because you're dealing with a problem that's very complex. The way forward is unclear. There's a lot of uncertainty. That's why the meeting is taking place in the first place. That's the reason you have 5 or 10 people in the room. And it is highly unlikely that one person in the room happens to have the right answer ready to go and they just need to share it. More likely, the way forward is going to be a composite of a lot of different ideas from a lot of different people. It's going to take a lot of different points of view and perspectives and pros and cons and arguments from different people coming together in order to create a strategy that perhaps is more similar to what somebody in the room had originally said, but is still a refined version of it. Now, the mistake we make is that we create these cultures in subtle ways. If you end your meeting by saying things like, I think Julie had it right from the beginning, or I think we should go with Rob's idea, you've made a huge mistake because you've shown everybody that you're the kind of leader who rewards people for coming up with the right answer, the right solution. And the next time you have a meeting, everybody's going to be looking at you as they speak, and they're going to be waiting to see if you're nodding along, and they're not going to want to say anything that they think is not going to end up being the way you end up moving forward. If you want to make sure people share their best arguments, if you want to make sure that people feel comfortable saying things, even though there's a chance, maybe even a good chance, that the idea will actually be rejected, if you want to make sure people say things when they disagree with the group, you want to make sure that when you end your meetings, you don't just pat people on the back because they came up with the right idea first. Rather, you want to make sure that when you end your meetings, you remind people about all of the good ideas that came up, all of the good arguments that were made, that perhaps ultimately were rejected, that perhaps ultimately did not weigh heavily in the decision that you formally announced as the way forward. When you are seen as a leader who at the end of every meeting points out all of the good arguments that were made, rather than just shining a light on the person who came up with what was closest to the right answer, you're much more likely to be someone who in the next meeting will have a much more productive discussion where people are willing and feel comfortable and safe sharing ideas where there is some risk that those ideas might not be the right one. Because only when people feel comfortable doing that are you going to solve the big, ugly, complex problems that you're dealing with and calling those meetings for in the first place. Good luck.